The metallic click of the Rolodex spinning on my desk shouldn't have been the sound that ended my career. But when Colton Reeves pointed at it and laughed loud enough for the entire operations floor to hear, I knew something was about to break. "Are you serious right now?" His voice cut through the hum of keyboards and phone calls. "You still use one of these things? What are you, 80? 23 faces turned toward my desk. I could feel their eyes on me as I looked up from my spreadsheet. Colton stood there in his tailored suit, the one that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his phone held up like he was recording this moment for posterity. "It works," I said simply. My voice stayed level, the way it always did. "It works," he mimicked, making his voice higher, whinier. More laughter from the desks around us. "You know what else works? This century, technology, progress. But I guess some people just can't adapt." As the story unfolds, take a moment to like, hit the hype button, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive him or walk away? I watched him pick up the Rolodex, flipping through the cards with exaggerated disgust. Each card represented years of careful relationship building. Suppliers who gave us priority shipping, vendors who answered after hours, contacts my mother had helped me develop before she passed away 6 years ago. "Put it down, Colton." I kept my tone neutral, professional. "Or what?" He spun it on his finger like a basketball. "You going to report me to my dad?" That got the biggest laugh yet. Everyone knew Victor Reeves, the VP, had installed his son in a management position 3 months ago, despite Colton having zero experience in operations. Everyone knew pointing that out was career termination. I stood slowly, keeping my hands relaxed at my sides. "I need those contacts for the Boone Partnership logistics." "The Boone Partnership?" Colton set the Rolodex down with a thud. "Yeah, about that. I've been reviewing your position here, Aaron. Turns out we don't really need someone stuck in the past handling our biggest deal. We need forward-thinking leadership." The floor went quiet. Not the comfortable silence of people focused on work. The tense, holding-your-breath silence of witnesses to something ugly. "I've coordinated every aspect of the Boone logistics for 8 months," I said. My heart rate stayed steady. Years of staying calm under pressure had trained me well. The file system, the scheduling, the supplier network, everything. Everything I can handle better. Colton pulled out his phone, tapping rapidly. "I'm sending the files to myself right now. Consider yourself reassigned." "Reassigned to what?" He looked up, and I saw it then. The specific kind of cruelty that comes from someone who's never faced real consequences. "Reassigned to nowhere. You're done, old man. Clean out your desk." The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone's coffee cup clinked against a desk. A phone buzzed, ignored. "You're firing me?" I needed him to say it clearly, for the record, for later. "I'm letting you go." He repeated it louder this time, making sure everyone heard. "Your outdated methods, your relic-level tools, your complete inability to adapt. This company is moving forward, and you're holding it back." He picked up one of my project folders and threw it toward me. Papers scattered across the desk, onto the floor. The quarterly logistics report I'd spent 40 hours perfecting. Charts showing how I'd reduced shipping costs by 18%, vendor contracts I'd personally negotiated. I didn't bend down to pick them up. Instead, I pulled my jacket from the back of my chair, folded it over my arm, and walked toward the elevator lobby. Behind me, I heard Colton telling someone to box up my desk. Heard nervous laughter. Heard the operations floor slowly return to its background hum. The elevator doors opened just as I reached them, but I didn't step inside. Because standing in the lobby, leather briefcase in hand, expensive boots clicking on the polished floor, was Everett Boone himself. The billionaire ranch owner we'd been courting for 9 months. The man whose partnership contract was worth $43 million to our firm. The investor who could make or break careers with a single phone call. He saw me immediately, and his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Aaron Hale." He crossed the lobby in 4 long strides, extending his hand. "Wasn't expecting to run into you down here. Thought you'd be upstairs preparing for our meeting." I shook his hand, felt the calluses that proved he still worked his own land despite his wealth. "Mr. Boone, good to see you. Been meaning to call you directly about those supply chain adjustments you suggested. Saved me a headache with the winter feed logistics." He glanced past me toward the elevator. "You heading out for lunch? We could grab something, go over the final details." Behind us, the elevator dinged. Doors opened. I heard Colton's voice before I saw him. "Mr. Boone, welcome, welcome. I'm Colton Reeves. We spoke on the phone yesterday. I'm handling your partnership personally now." Boone's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He looked from Colton to me, then back to Colton. "You're handling it?" "That's right." Colton stepped between us, physically blocking me. There have been some personnel changes. Upgrades, really. I wanted to let you know personally that you'll be working with me from now on. Fresh perspective, modern approach. Personnel changes. Boone said it slowly, like he was tasting the words. Where's Aaron going? Oh, he's transitioning out of the company, Colton said smoothly. We appreciate his service, but it's time for new leadership on projects of this magnitude. Boone looked at me, really looked at me. I saw the question in his eyes. I could have stayed quiet, could have walked away, let it happen, moved on to another job. That's what the old Aaron would have done. The Aaron who'd spent 6 years being underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued. But I thought about my mother then, about the box of documents sitting in my apartment, about the envelope I'd found 2 days ago that I hadn't opened yet. He fired me, I said quietly. About 5 minutes ago, in front of the entire operations floor. The lobby went very still. Colton's face reddened. Boone's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He fired who? Boone's voice dropped 20 degrees. Colton started talking fast. It was a necessary business decision. Aaron's methods were outdated. We need agile leadership for a partnership of your caliber. I assure you the transition will be seamless. Boone turned to face Colton fully. The man who set up our entire logistics framework, who personally coordinated with my ranch manager every week for 8 months, who caught that supplier error that would have cost me $200,000. You fired him. Today, 5 minutes before I arrived for our final contract meeting. I can handle everything he was doing, Colton insisted. Better, actually. I have a vision for modernizing the whole system. A vision. Boone looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned to me. Aaron, you got somewhere to be right now? No, sir. Good. You're coming with me. He picked up his briefcase. Meeting's postponed, Mr. Reeves. I'll call your father directly when I'm ready to reschedule, if I reschedule. He walked toward the exit. I followed, my jacket still folded over my arm. Behind us, I heard Colton sputtering protests. Heard him pull out his phone, probably calling his father, but I didn't look back. Not yet. The drive to my apartment took 20 minutes. Boone didn't come up, just waited while I retrieved what I needed. 3 years earlier, I wouldn't have known what to grab. But 2 days ago, I'd found my mother's note, and now I knew exactly which box to open. Inside my apartment, I knelt beside the storage closet and pulled out the gray filing container I'd moved 3 times without ever really examining. Property of Marlene Hale, my mother had written on the side in her neat handwriting. Below that, a date, April 2019, the month before she got sick. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside were folders, envelopes, and a leather journal I'd never seen before. On top sat a sealed envelope with my name written across it in her handwriting. My hands shook slightly as I broke the seal. Aaron, if you're reading this, someone tried to make you disappear. Probably the same way they tried with me. Remember the stories I told you about my early days at the firm? The systems I built, the partners I brought in, the foundation I laid? Victor Reeves took credit for all of it. When I confronted him, he pushed me out quietly, made me sign papers, told me I'd never work in the industry again if I fought back. I was angry for years. Then I got sick, and anger seemed pointless. But I kept records, baby. Everything. Every contract I negotiated, every partner I introduced, every system I developed, including the original partnership agreement that brought Everett Boone into discussions with the firm. The one that included my name as a coordinating stakeholder with permanent equity rights. They buried that document, restructured around it, hoped I'd never use it. I didn't, but you can. When they try to erase you, and they will, because you have my competence without my weakness, you open the folder marked Foundation Contracts. You'll find everything you need. Make them remember we existed, both of us. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I opened the folder she'd indicated. Inside were photocopies of contracts dating back 12 years, partnership agreements, operating procedures, financial arrangements. And there, on page 4 of the Boone Preliminary Partnership Proposal, was my mother's signature as Primary Operational Coordinator and Equity Stakeholder. The date was June 2013, 2 years before Victor Reeves claimed he'd developed the relationship with Boone personally. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Then I carefully placed the originals back in the box, loaded everything into my car, and drove to the one place I knew would be safe. My mother's storage unit sat on the edge of town, the kind of place where you pay cash and nobody asks questions. I'd kept paying the rental fee automatically for 6 years without ever visiting. Now I understood why she'd insisted I maintain it. Unit 247 smelled like cardboard and dust. Inside were more boxes, more files, more pieces of a story I'd never fully understood. I spent 2 hours going through everything methodically. Financial records showing payments my mother had facilitated between the firm and early partners. Meeting notes in her handwriting, detailing conversations with Everett Boone about livestock supply logistics and ranch operations. Email printouts proving she'd developed the initial relationship framework that Victor later claimed as his own achievement. And at the bottom of the last box, another envelope. This one simply labeled, "Open only when they try to erase you." I sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit and opened it. Inside was a single document. A contract amendment dated July 2013, signed by my mother, Victor Reeves, and 3 board members. The amendment specifically stated that in the event of my mother's departure or incapacitation, her equity stake and decision-making rights regarding the Boone partnership would transfer to her designated heir and successor. She'd named me. When I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, she'd named me as her successor in a deal nobody remembered she'd started. At the bottom, in her handwriting, "They'll forget this exists. Make sure you don't." I took photographs of everything, organized the documents into 3 categories: contracts, correspondence, and financial records. By the time I finished, the storage unit looked like a legal preparation room. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenna Ward, one of the operations coordinators who'd witnessed my firing. "You should know something I saw earlier. Colton was in your files before you came in this morning. Deleted folders from the shared drive. Thought you'd want to know." I stared at the message. Then I typed back, "Thank you. I appreciate you telling me." She responded immediately, "What he did was wrong. We all know it." I pocketed my phone and looked around the storage unit one more time. My mother had spent her last healthy months preparing for this, building a foundation I could stand on when everything else got pulled away. She'd known Victor would eventually turn on anyone competent enough to threaten his manufactured image. She'd known his arrogance would be inherited by his son. She'd known that someday someone would try to erase the contributions she'd made. What she couldn't have known was that it would take me 6 years to understand what she'd left me. I locked the storage unit and drove home slowly. The sun was setting behind the downtown office buildings, painting everything in orange and gold. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Colton was probably celebrating his power move. Victor was probably reassuring him that firing me was the right decision, and Everett Boone was probably making phone calls. I spent that evening at my kitchen table organizing everything into a single narrative: contract dates, email timestamps, financial transfers, partnership development timelines. Every piece of evidence told the same story. My mother had built something real, and the Reeves family had stolen credit for it. Now they'd tried to erase me the same way, but I wasn't my mother. I didn't have her weakness, her willingness to walk away quietly. I had her strength, her documentation, and 6 years of my own contributions to add to the pile. Around midnight, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., if you're interested." Inside was a single line. "My ranch office. Come alone. EB." I looked at the piles of documents spread across my table, at the photographs on my phone, at my mother's journal sitting open to a page where she'd written, "Patience isn't weakness, it's preparation." I typed back a single word: confirmed. Then I started organizing everything into a presentation format. Not for revenge, not yet. For justice, for my mother, for myself, for every person who'd ever been erased by someone louder and less competent. Everett Boone's ranch sat 40 minutes outside the city, past the suburbs where developments gave way to actual land. The main house was surprisingly modest for a billionaire, but the operation itself stretched for acres. Cattle grazed in distant fields. Horses moved through well-maintained paddocks. Everything spoke of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The ranch office was a separate building near the main gate, all wood and glass, with a view of the property. Boone met me at the door himself, no assistant or secretary between us. "Coffee?" he asked, gesturing me inside. "Please." He poured 2 cups from a carafe that looked like it had been waiting. The office was cleaner than I expected, with actual filing cabinets along one wall and a desk that showed signs of regular use. A working space, not a showpiece. "I made some calls yesterday," Boone said, settling into his chair and gesturing for me to take the seat across from him. "Interesting things came up." I sipped my coffee and waited. My mother had taught me that silence was often more powerful than speech. "Your mother was Marlene Hale." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. She reached out to me 12 years ago about supply logistics for a firm I'd never heard of. Small company at the time, but she had this presentation about agricultural supply networks that impressed me. We talked for 6 months before I agreed to explore a partnership. I didn't know that, I said quietly. She never told me the details. Victor Reeves showed up to our first formal meeting, introduced himself as the architect of the whole proposal. Your mother sat there and didn't contradict him. Boone's jaw tightened. I asked her about it later, privately. She said it didn't matter who got credit as long as the work got done right. I gripped my coffee cup a little tighter. That sounded exactly like something she would say. Then she got sick, and Reeves told me she'd retired, started taking credit for everything openly. By the time I realized what had happened, she was gone, and correcting the record seemed cruel, like I was diminishing her memory by fighting over who deserved recognition. Boone leaned forward. But yesterday, when that arrogant kid fired you in front of me like you were nothing, I remembered your mother, remembered how she got pushed aside, and I thought, here we go again. He deleted my files from the shared drive, I said, started erasing my work before I even left the building. I'm not surprised. Boone pulled a folder from his desk drawer. This is the original partnership proposal your mother sent me in 2013. I kept it because her work was thorough, professional, the kind of document you hold on to as a reference. He slid it across the desk. I opened it carefully. There was my mother's name on the signature line. Primary Operational Coordinator. And in smaller text below, Equity Stakeholder as per internal agreement dated June 2013. She never mentioned equity, I said. She wouldn't. Boone stood and walked to his filing cabinet, pulling out another folder. But I asked about it during negotiations. Wanted to make sure I was dealing with authorized parties. Victor provided documentation confirming her stake. It's why certain contract clauses were written the way they were. He handed me the second folder. Inside were email exchanges between Boone's lawyers and the firm's legal team. Clear references to Hale equity position and stakeholder coordination rights. They can't pretend she didn't exist, I said slowly. It's in your contracts. It's in our preliminary agreements, which are technically still active since we never finalized the full partnership. Boone returned to his seat. Been dragging my feet on that for years, actually. Something about Victor always bothered me. Now I know what. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photographs I'd taken from my mother's storage unit. The contract amendments, the equity documents, the email trails proving her role. Boone studied each image carefully. You've been preparing for this? I only found these documents 2 days ago. She left them for me in case this ever happened. Smart woman. Boone handed back my phone. So what are you planning to do with all this? It was the question I'd been asking myself since yesterday. What did I want? Revenge felt too simple, too emotional. Justice felt closer, but still not quite right. I want the record corrected, I said finally. I want my mother's contributions acknowledged. I want the firm to admit that what happened to her and what happened to me yesterday were both wrong, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Boone smiled slightly. That's a tall order. I have the documentation. Documentation isn't always enough. You need leverage. What kind of leverage? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. The kind that comes from having something they need more than you need them. Right now, they think you're gone, erased. Yesterday's problem. But what they don't know is that I'm not signing anything until this is resolved. You'd hold up the deal? Son, I've been holding up this deal for 3 years, waiting to see if Victor would ever do the right thing and acknowledge your mother's role. He never did. Now he's raising a boy who thinks firing good people is a power move. Boone shook his head. I've got enough money. What I don't have is patience for that kind of behavior. I set down my coffee cup carefully. What do you propose? You go back and file a formal complaint with HR. Document everything. Use your mother's contracts to establish that you have a legitimate stakeholder interest in any partnership bearing her foundational work. Make it official, make it legal, make it impossible to dismiss. They'll fight it. Of course they will. But while they're fighting, I'll be asking questions, lots of questions, about contract authenticity, about equity obligations, about whether the people I'm partnering with have been honest about the origins of our relationship. He smiled. Billionaires asking questions make lawyers nervous. Nervous lawyers make executives scramble. Scrambling executives make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, that's when you present everything you have, publicly, professionally, with documentation they can't dispute. Boone stood, extending his hand. Your mother started something good 12 years ago. Let's finish it right. I shook his hand, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger anymore. Not even determination. Clarity. The HR conference room smelled like recycled air and industrial carpet. Paula Kent, the director of human resources, sat across from me with a yellow legal pad and a neutral expression that probably took years to perfect. Thank you for coming in, Aaron. I understand you have concerns about your termination. I have documentation about my termination, I corrected gently, and questions about the process that led to it. She clicked her pen. Walk me through what happened, please, from your perspective. I laid out the timeline methodically. The public humiliation, the deletion of my files, the immediate transfer of my project responsibilities to someone with no relevant experience. I kept my tone level, factual, focusing on actions rather than emotions. Paula took notes without commenting. When I finished, she looked up. You mentioned documentation? I pulled out a folder containing printed emails, project timelines, and witness statements Jenna had helped me collect from other operations staff. Everything's dated and verified. I also have concerns about the termination process itself. I was never given a performance warning. No documentation of inadequacy, no progressive discipline, just a public firing based on personal preference. Paula flipped through the papers slowly. Her neutral expression cracked slightly when she reached the witness statements. 5 people describing the same scene. The same humiliating display. This is thorough, she said quietly. There's more. I pulled out a second folder. I'd also like to inquire about equity stakeholder rights in ongoing partnerships, specifically the Boone arrangement. Paula's head snapped up. Equity stakeholder rights? I slid across copies of my mother's original contracts. My mother, Marlene Hale, was designated as a coordinating stakeholder in the preliminary Boone partnership agreements dating back to 2013. Upon her passing, those rights transferred to me as her designated successor. I'm concerned that my termination may have occurred specifically to circumvent those rights. Paula stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Aaron, I need to be honest. I wasn't with the company in 2013. I've never seen these contracts before. I know, they were buried, deliberately. She set down her pen. You're alleging that you were fired to prevent you from exercising historical stakeholder rights? I'm stating facts and asking for clarification. If I have no such rights, fine. But if I do, then my termination takes on a different character. It becomes interference with a legal business interest. Paula closed the folders carefully. I need to consult with legal. This is beyond standard termination review. I understand. When should I expect to hear back? Give me 48 hours. She stood, but hesitated at the door. Aaron, off the record, what you're describing is serious. If even half of this is substantiated, there are going to be consequences. I'm only interested in appropriate consequences, not revenge. She studied me for a moment. Your mother must have taught you patience. She taught me documentation. After Paula left, I sat in the conference room for another few minutes, organizing my thoughts. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you were in the building. Stay away from my father's office. You're trespassing. C.R. Colton, trying to intimidate me through text message. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Paula with a simple note. For your records. Then I drove to the downtown courthouse and filed formal paperwork requesting recognition of stakeholder rights based on historical partnership agreements. The clerk seemed bored by the whole process, but everything was official now, time-stamped, registered, part of the public record. My phone rang as I walked back to my car. Everett Boone. You stir things up yet? He asked without preamble. HR is reviewing. I filed formal recognition requests with the county recorder. Everything's official. Good, because I just got a very interesting phone call from Victor Reeves. He wants to meet tomorrow to finalize our deal. Says he's prepared to offer improved terms. He's panicking. He's scrambling, which means he knows about your HR visit. Boone chuckled. Nothing travels faster than gossip in a nervous company. How'd your meeting go? Paula Kent seems fair. She's reviewing everything. Kent's solid. Worked with her before when I was vetting the firm's procedures. She plays by the book, which means she'll follow wherever the evidence leads. Boone paused. You ready for this to get ugly? It's already ugly. I'm just making it official. That's the spirit. Listen, I'm scheduling a public announcement for the partnership. Week from Friday, downtown hotel ballroom. Standard investor presentation format. Victor thinks it's his big moment. What is it really? Insurance. When you present documentation publicly, you want witnesses, lots of witnesses, business journalists, board members, investors, people who can't pretend they didn't see what happened. His tone turned serious. Your mother deserved better than being erased from history. So do you. Let's make sure the record gets set straight where everyone can see it. Week from Friday, I repeated. That's 9 days. 9 days to make sure your documentation is airtight, to prepare your presentation, to coordinate with HR and legal so everything's by the book. Boone's voice softened. And 9 days to be absolutely certain this is what you want. Once you step on that stage, there's no taking it back. I thought about my mother's note, about 6 years of being underestimated, about Colton's sneer as he threw my folder toward me. I'm certain, I said. Then let's do this right. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Paula Kent called me 3 times for additional clarification. Each conversation lasted over an hour, diving deep into contract language and corporate structure. On day 3, she requested a formal meeting with me, the firm's legal counsel, and an external mediator. Standard procedure for complex stakeholder disputes, she explained. The company is taking your claims seriously. The mediation session took place in a law office downtown. Victor Reeves sat at one end of the conference table, his lawyer beside him. Colton was notably absent. The mediator, a gray-haired woman named Diane Foster, ran the proceedings with surgical precision. Mr. Hale, please summarize your position, she instructed. I laid out the facts methodically. My mother's role in developing the Boone partnership, her documented equity stake, the transfer of rights upon her passing, my continuation of her work, the suspicious timing of my dismissal. Victor's lawyer objected repeatedly, calling the claims historically dubious and strategically timed. Then I presented the contracts. Original signatures, dated correspondence, email trails, financial records, every piece of documentation my mother had preserved. The room went quiet. These contracts are 12 years old, Victor finally said. The structure of the company has changed significantly since then. Marlene's contributions were valuable at the time, but they've been superseded by subsequent developments. Superseded or buried? I asked calmly. Victor's face reddened. We gave Marlene full recognition for her work. She chose to step away. She was pushed out, and you know it. That's a serious accusation, his lawyer interjected. It's a documented fact. I slid a folder across the table. My mother's personal notes from her final months at the firm. Contemporaneous accounts of being excluded from meetings. Projects reassigned without explanation. Credit systematically redirected to senior management. Paula Kent read through the notes with a deepening frown. These are detailed, specific, with dates and witnesses. My mother knew documentation mattered. I looked directly at Victor. Just like I know that deleting my project files and firing me publicly was designed to erase my connection to work I'd spent 8 months developing. The mediator raised her hand. Let's focus on the legal questions. Mr. Hale, you're claiming stakeholder rights. The company disputes those claims. What's your proposed resolution? Recognition. My mother's name restored to the historical partnership documentation. An acknowledgement that her contributions formed the foundation of the Boone relationship. And clarification of my rights regarding ongoing partnership decisions. Victor's lawyer leaned forward. And if the company maintains that no such rights exist, then we'll present all documentation publicly at next week's investor announcement and let the business community decide whether they want to partner with a firm that erases its contributors. The threat hung in the air. Victor's jaw clenched. You'd sabotage the deal? He asked. I'd tell the truth. Whether that sabotages anything depends on how uncomfortable you are with reality. The mediation broke for lunch after that. Paula Kent pulled me aside in the hallway. You're playing hardball, she said quietly. I'm stating facts. Facts that could tank a $43 million deal. She studied me carefully. Is that really what you want? I want the record set straight. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe the record should have been accurate from the start. She nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I believe you. Your documentation is too detailed to be fabricated, and Colton's behavior has been concerning for weeks. She glanced back toward the conference room. But believing you and fixing this are different things. Victor has institutional power. You have paper. Paper is what courts use to make decisions. Courts take time. You have 9 days. Then I'll make sure 9 days is enough. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Jenna Ward knocked on my apartment door holding a file folder and a nervous expression. I shouldn't be doing this, she said as I let her in, but you should know what's happening at the office. She handed me the folder. Inside were email printouts between Colton and his father, discussing the Hale problem. References to managing the situation and controlling the narrative. A particularly damning exchange about neutralizing stakeholder claims before the announcement. Where did you get these? I asked. Colton's been using the shared printer. He's not as careful as he thinks. Jenna wrapped her arms around herself. Aaron, they're scared. Really scared. Which means they're going to fight dirty. I expected that. No, I mean really underhanded. Colton was talking today about leaking information that makes you look unstable, questioning your mental state, suggesting you're having some kind of breakdown after your mother's passing. My hands tightened on the folder. That's textbook defamation. It's also effective if people believe it, and Colton's good at making people believe things. She met my eyes. You need to be ready for them to come after your credibility, your reputation, anything they can use. I set the folder down carefully. Thank you for the warning. There's something else. She pulled out her phone, showing me a calendar invitation. The announcement next Friday, Colton's presenting. Victor arranged for him to be the face of the partnership. Big moment, career-making opportunity, all eyes on the future of the firm. Interesting timing. That's what I thought. They're not just trying to erase you. They're replacing you with someone demonstrably less qualified. Jenna pocketed her phone, which might actually work in your favor, if you can prove it. After she left, I spent the evening organizing everything into a final presentation, not just contracts and emails. A complete narrative showing how my mother built something valuable, how she was erased, and how the same pattern was now repeating with me. The story wasn't complicated. It was human, understandable, the kind of thing that made people angry when presented clearly. My phone rang at 10 p.m. Everett Boone. Victor just called. He's offering me a 15% reduction in fees to finalize everything before Friday's announcement. Generous of him. Desperate, more like. He knows something's coming. He just doesn't know what. Boone paused. You ready? Almost. I need 2 more pieces. What pieces? HR's final report on my termination, and confirmation that the board knows about the stakeholder dispute. I pulled up my notes. If I'm going public with this, I need to make sure every internal channel has been exhausted. Otherwise, it looks like I skipped procedure. Smart. Cover your bases legally before you go nuclear publicly. Exactly. You're your mother's son, Aaron. She'd be proud. Those words hit harder than I expected. I had to clear my throat before responding. I hope so. One more thing. Friday's announcement is invitation only. Corporate people, investors, financial journalists, the works. I made sure your name is on the list. Won't Victor object? He tried. I told him if Aaron Hale isn't there, I'm not signing anything. He backed down fast. Boone chuckled. Sometimes billionaire privilege is useful. Now get some sleep. You've got 4 days to make everything perfect. I hung up and looked at the piles of documentation covering my dining table. 12 years of hidden history, 6 years of personal experience, 9 days of intensive preparation, 4 more days until the moment everything came into focus. I thought about my mother sitting in this same apartment, organizing these same documents, knowing she'd never use them herself, but hoping I would when the time came. The time had come. Paula Kent's email arrived Wednesday morning, short and direct. Final report complete. Please come to my office at 2 p.m. today. I arrived 10 minutes early. Paula's office was surprisingly cluttered for an HR director, with files stacked on every surface and a coffee mug collection that suggested she practically lived there. She gestured me to a seat and slid a bound document across her desk. This is the official report. It'll be presented to the board tomorrow morning. I opened it carefully. The summary section was damning. Employee termination of Aaron Hale failed to follow established progressive discipline procedures. No prior warnings, no documentation of performance deficiencies, no managerial review before action. Termination appears to have been conducted for personal rather than professional reasons. Additionally, deletion of employee files and immediate transfer of projects raises questions about intent to obscure employee contributions. Recommend immediate reinstatement with back pay and formal investigation into management conduct. I looked up. Paula was watching me carefully. This is comprehensive, I said. It's factual. The evidence is clear. She pulled out another folder. This is the supplementary report, the one about your stakeholder claims. I opened it more slowly. This document was longer, filled with legal analysis and historical contract review. Legal counsel confirms that your mother's equity stake was legitimate and the transfer provisions were properly executed. However, subsequent corporate restructuring created ambiguity about the scope and application of those rights. Paula leaned forward. Which means you have a legitimate claim, but it's complicated enough that litigation would take years. Or I could present everything publicly and let market pressure force a resolution, I said. That's the nuclear option. It works, but it burns bridges. Some bridges deserve burning. She smiled slightly. Victor's going to fight this. He's already retained outside counsel, preparing counter-arguments. getting ready to frame this as a disgruntled employee making false claims. Let him try. I have documentation. He has institutional power and media connections. Paula closed the folders. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm making sure you understand what you're walking into. This will get messy, publicly messy. I understand. Do you? She studied me carefully. Because once you go public with allegations of corporate misconduct, your professional reputation is tied to this forever. Win or lose, you become that guy who sued his employer. Some people will respect it, others will see you as trouble. My mother was that woman who quietly disappeared. I'd rather be trouble. Paula nodded slowly. Then make sure your presentation is airtight. No emotional appeals, just facts, documentation, and clear violation of procedure. Make it impossible for them to dismiss you as bitter or unstable. That's the plan. She stood, extending her hand. Good luck Friday. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. I shook her hand. Thank you, for being fair, for following procedure, for not taking the easy way out. That's my job. I just wish more people understood that. I left her office feeling something shift. Not confidence exactly, more like readiness, the kind of calm that comes before decisive action. My phone buzzed with a text from Boone. Board meeting tomorrow morning. They'll know about HR report before Friday. Should make things interesting. I typed back, ready when you are. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I visited my mother's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. Her headstone was simple. Marlene Hale, 1966-2019, beloved mother and professional. I sat on the grass beside it and pulled out the presentation folder I'd been refining all week. I found your notes, I said quietly. Took me 6 years, but I finally understood what you were trying to tell me. A bird called from somewhere nearby. The wind moved through the trees. I'm going to finish what you started, Mom, not because I'm angry, because it's right, because people should know what you built, what you contributed, what they took from you. I laid the folder on the grass. I hope I'm doing this the way you would have wanted, with documentation, with procedure, with facts instead of emotion. The sun dropped lower, stretching shadows across the cemetery. I stayed there until the light faded, talking to her about the plan, about the evidence, about how scared and ready I felt at the same time. Finally, I stood and brushed off my pants. See you on the other side of this, Mom. The next morning, I woke to a string of text messages. Jenna had sent screenshots from the office chat system. Everyone knew about the HR report. People were choosing sides. Operations staff were largely supportive. Management was circling wagons. One message stood out. From a senior analyst I barely knew. Finally, someone standing up to that family. Good luck tomorrow. Tomorrow was Friday. The announcement. The moment everything became public. I spent Thursday doing final preparations, printed backup copies of every document, created a digital presentation with clear slides and minimal text, rehearsed my points until they flowed naturally. By evening, I had everything loaded on 2 USB drives, backed up in cloud storage, and organized in a leather portfolio my mother had given me for college graduation. For important presentations, she'd written in the card, use it well. I was finally going to. Thursday night, I received one final call from Everett Boone. Victor tried one more time to cancel your invitation, threatened to pull out of the announcement entirely if I insisted you be there. What did you say? I said that sounded like a man with something to hide. Then I reminded him I have lawyers who specialize in contract disputes and very deep pockets for litigation. Boone chuckled. He decided your presence was acceptable after all? Thank you for that. Thank me by being brilliant tomorrow, by presenting so clearly and professionally that nobody can dismiss what you're saying, by making your mother proud. I will. One last thing, when you take the stage tomorrow, remember you're not attacking anyone. You're correcting the record. Big difference in how it lands with an audience. Correcting the record. Got it. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you change your life. I hung up and looked around my apartment, at the documents that told a 12-year story, at the evidence that would finally set things straight, at the leather portfolio waiting by the door. Tomorrow, Victor and Colton would try to claim credit for work they didn't do. Tomorrow, Everett Boone would redirect attention to the truth. Tomorrow, I would finish what my mother started. Tomorrow, the record would finally be set straight. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep, but my mind kept running through the presentation, checking details, anticipating objections, preparing for every possible response. At 3 a.m., I gave up and made coffee, sat at my kitchen table and read through my mother's journal one more time, Her handwriting was neat, methodical, each entry dated and organized. One entry from August 2018 caught my attention. Aaron started at the firm today. Already I can see them underestimating him the same way they did me, but he's smarter than they know. Patient, careful. When his moment comes, he'll be ready. I closed the journal carefully. She was right. My moment had come, and I was ready. The downtown hotel ballroom buzzed with controlled chaos. Corporate banners hung from the walls. A stage dominated one end of the room, complete with podium, microphone, and a massive screen for presentations. Round tables filled the space, each marked with names of investors, board members, and financial journalists. I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing the suit I'd bought for my mother's funeral and hadn't worn since. It felt appropriate somehow, coming full circle. A young woman with a headset and clipboard checked my name against her list. Her eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Hale? I wasn't expecting you until later." "I wanted to get settled." She assigned me a table near the back, away from the main investor section. Deliberate placement, keeping me peripheral. The room filled gradually, investors in expensive suits, board members clustered in serious conversations, journalists comparing notes and testing recording equipment, the kind of crowd that could make or break corporate reputations. Victor Reeves arrived like royalty, shaking hands and laughing too loud. Colton followed close behind, trying to project confidence, but mostly succeeding at nervous energy. They worked the room efficiently, building anticipation. Neither of them noticed me sitting in the back. Everett Boone entered last, his arrival shifting the room's energy immediately. People straightened, conversations paused. He scanned the crowd, found me, and gave the smallest nod. Then he moved toward the investor tables, deliberately positioning himself where he could see both the stage and me. Paula Kent appeared at my elbow. "You clean up nice." "Thanks. The board reviewed my report this morning. They're concerned." She glanced toward Victor. "What happens today matters. Trust your documentation." She moved away as the lights dimmed. Victor took the stage first, basking in the spotlight. "Welcome, everyone, to what I believe will be a transformative day for our firm. We're here to announce a partnership that will reshape our industry presence." He launched into a presentation heavy on corporate jargon and light on substance, buzzwords about synergistic relationships and paradigm-shifting collaboration. The investors listened politely, but I could see some checking phones. "And now," Victor continued, "I'd like to introduce the young leader who will be spearheading this partnership. My son, Colton Reeves." Applause as Colton took the stage. He looked nervous, but launched into his presentation with forced enthusiasm. "This partnership with Everett Boone represents everything we've been working toward," Colton said, clicking to a slide showing projected revenue growth. "Using modern systems and forward-thinking strategies, we're positioned to revolutionize agricultural supply chains." I watched Everett Boone's face. It remained neutral, but his eyes were sharp, evaluating. Colton continued for 15 minutes, describing plans that were mostly my ideas, repackaged with different terminology. Supply chain optimization I'd developed, logistics frameworks I'd built, vendor relationships I'd cultivated, all presented as Colton's innovation. When he finished, Victor returned to the stage. "Before we move to the formal signing, Mr. Boone has asked to say a few words." Boone rose slowly, commanding attention without effort. He walked to the stage with confident ease. "Thank you, Victor. Colton." He turned to face the audience. "I appreciate the presentation. Very slick, very modern, very forward-thinking, as you say." Something in his tone made people lean forward. But I have to admit, as I listened to these plans, I kept thinking about history, about how this partnership actually started, about the people who built the foundation you're now standing on. Victor's smile faltered. 12 years ago, Boone continued, I received an impressive proposal about agricultural supply logistics. Detailed, professional, thoroughly researched. It came from a woman named Marlene Hale. She spent 6 months working with me to develop the framework that eventually became our preliminary partnership agreement. The room went very quiet. Several journalists started typing rapidly. Marlene passed away 6 years ago. Most of you probably never met her, but her work is the reason we're all here today. Boone paused, which is why I find it interesting that her name hasn't been mentioned once this morning. Victor stood frozen at the edge of the stage. Colton had gone pale. "There's someone else whose name hasn't been mentioned," Boone said. "Someone who spent the last 8 months coordinating every detail of our logistics integration, who caught supplier errors that would have cost me significant money." He looked directly at me. "Aaron Hale, would you join me up here, please?" Every head in the room turned toward the back. I stood slowly, feeling dozens of eyes tracking my movement. The walk to the stage felt both endless and instantaneous. Boone shook my hand firmly. Aaron here is Marlene's son. He's also the person who actually developed most of the systems Colton just presented. I stepped to the microphone. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. I have a presentation to share if everyone can spare a few minutes. I plugged in my USB drive. The screen behind me lit up with the first slide. Partnership Origins, a historical correction. For the next 20 minutes, I walked through the documentation methodically. My mother's original proposal, her equity stake, email trails proving her foundational role, timeline showing how Victor systematically claimed credit for her work. Then I shifted to more recent events, my own contributions over the past 8 months, the systems I'd built, the supplier relationships I'd maintained, the problems I'd solved, and finally, my public firing. Colton's deletion of my files, the timing coinciding with stakeholder rights assertions, the HR investigation findings. I presented everything in neutral language. No accusations, no emotional appeals, just facts, dates, and documentation displayed for everyone to see. When I finished, the room was completely silent. These contracts are legitimate, I said, displaying my mother's original stakeholder agreement. Her rights transferred to me upon her passing, which means I have a legal interest in any partnership that builds on her foundational work. Victor found his voice. This is a gross misrepresentation of events. Marlene was a valued team member, but I have her signature on the original proposal, I interrupted calmly, along with email correspondence showing she initiated contact with Mr. Boone. Would you like me to display those as well? Journalists were photographing the screen. Board members were whispering urgently. Investors looked between Victor and me with calculating expressions. Paula Kent stood and walked to the front. For the record, Human Resources has completed a thorough investigation. Mr. Hale's termination violated multiple company policies. His stakeholder claims are supported by historical documentation. She handed a document to Victor. Your formal notification of administrative review, effective immediately. Victor took it with shaking hands. Colton looked like he wanted to disappear. Boone returned to the microphone. The partnership announcement is postponed pending resolution of these matters. I'll be conducting my own review before making any final decisions about who I'm actually partnering with. He turned to me. Aaron, I'd like you to join me in my office Monday morning. Then he looked at Victor and Colton. Gentlemen, I suggest you consult with your legal counsel. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Journalists shouting questions, board members rushing toward Paula, investors clustering around Boone, Victor and Colton standing isolated on stage, their big moment transformed into public humiliation. I gathered my materials calmly, unplugged my USB drive, and walked toward the exit. Jenna intercepted me near the door. That was incredible. That was necessary. My phone buzzed. A text from Boone. Well done. Call me tomorrow. Another from Paula. Board meeting scheduled for Monday. I stepped outside into bright sunlight, leaving the chaos behind. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls and silence. Journalists requesting interviews, former coworkers offering support, HR calling with updates. But I spent most of the time at home, processing what had happened. Monday morning, I drove to Everett Boone's ranch. This time, I wasn't a desperate employee. I was a documented stakeholder. Boone greeted me with coffee. You've had an interesting weekend. That's one word for it. The business press is having a field day. Victor's on administrative leave. Colton's been removed from all leadership positions. He pulled out a folder. I've had my legal team review everything. Your mother's stakeholder position is legitimate. Her rights did transfer to you. So what happens now? We restructure the partnership, create a new entity that acknowledges your mother's foundational work and your ongoing role. You'd be a named partner, equity holder. He slid the folder across. Take a look. The document was comprehensive. Clear acknowledgement of Marlene Hale's originating role. Aaron Hale listed as successor stakeholder with full equity rights. This is fair, I said quietly. This is documented. 3 things Victor hates. Boone extended his hand. Welcome to the partnership, Aaron. We shook hands, and I felt something shift, like finishing something left undone too long. My phone rang. Paula Kent. The board wants to speak with you this afternoon, she said, about your future with the company. They're prepared to offer you Victor's position, interim VP of operations. I almost dropped the phone. Take until 3, she continued. That's when the meeting is. At 3 p.m., I sat in a boardroom facing 8 board members. The chairman, Gregory Walsh, led the meeting. Mr. Hale, last Friday's events were embarrassing but necessary. We're prepared to offer you the position of interim vice president of operations, effective immediately. What happens to Victor Reeves? Early retirement, and his son is no longer employed here. I looked around the table. These were people who'd let Victor operate unchecked for years, who'd allowed my mother to be pushed out. Now they wanted me to fix everything. I'll accept on 3 conditions, I said. Walsh raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. First, my mother's name gets added to every piece of historical documentation related to the Boone partnership. Done. Second, we implement clear policies preventing the kind of behavior Colton exhibited. Real consequences for policy violations. Reasonable. Third, I want full authority to restructure operations. Promote based on competence, not connections. Walsh looked at the other board members. Nods around the table. You have our support, he said. When can you start? Tomorrow. My first week as VP passed in a controlled storm of meetings and decisions. The operations floor buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone was waiting to see what I'd do. I started by calling an all-staff meeting. I know there are questions, I said, standing in front of the assembled team, about what happened, about what comes next. Here's what you need to know. Competence matters. Documentation matters. Doing good work matters. Playing politics and taking credit for other people's efforts doesn't. Faces around the room showed relief, anxiety, hope. We're rebuilding this department on clear standards. If you do good work, you'll be recognized. If you help others succeed, you'll advance. If you try to undermine your colleagues, you're gone. I paused. Questions? Jenna raised her hand. What about the Boone partnership? It's moving forward, with proper acknowledgement of everyone who contributed. I smiled slightly, including people who aren't here anymore but should be remembered. The restructuring took 2 weeks. I promoted 3 people who'd been overlooked, let go 2 managers who'd built careers on claiming others' work, implemented new documentation systems that made contributions visible. Everett Boone visited the office on Thursday. We walked through the updated logistics framework together, and I could see his approval. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so. By the end of the month, the board made my position permanent. VP of Operations, with full authority and a seat at executive meetings. Paula Kent stopped by my new office. How does it feel? Like finishing something that should have been done years ago. 3 months later, I stood in the same hotel ballroom where everything had changed. But this time, the banners were different. The energy was different. The presentation was different. Welcome, I said from the podium, to the official launch of the Hale Boone Agricultural Partnership. The room was packed. Investors, board members, journalists, even some of the old operations staff who'd supported me from the beginning. Everett Boone joined me on stage. This partnership is built on a foundation laid 12 years ago by Marlene Hale. Her vision, her relationships, her systems. Today we're not just launching a business venture, we're correcting history. The screen behind us displayed my mother's photograph, her signature on the original proposal, the documentation that proved what she'd built. Marlene understood something important, I continued. That real value comes from competence, not volume, from substance, not image, from doing the work, not just claiming credit for it. I clicked to the next slide showing partnership projections, supply chain improvements, financial forecasts. This partnership will succeed because it's built on what she started, because it acknowledges everyone who contributed, because it proves that quiet competence eventually wins. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes. Clear data, solid projections, professional execution. When we finished, the applause was genuine. Not the polite corporate clapping from before, but real appreciation. Afterward, investors lined up to discuss opportunities. Board members congratulated us. Journalists asked intelligent questions about our approach. I stood to the side, watching it all unfold, watching my mother's work finally get the recognition it deserved, watching a partnership built on truth instead of theft. Paula Kent approached with a smile. You did it. We did it. Boone joined us, shaking hands with satisfaction. 12 years to get here, but worth every day. I thought about the Rolodex sitting on my desk in the VP office, the same one Colton had mocked, the same system my mother had taught me, still working, still valuable, still connecting me to the relationships that mattered. My phone buzzed, a message from Jenna. Watching the live stream, your mom's smiling somewhere. I looked up at the screen still displaying my mother's photograph, her calm eyes, her professional smile, her legacy finally acknowledged. Victor and Colton were gone, erased by their own arrogance. Their names would be remembered only as cautionary tales about what happens when you steal credit and underestimate quiet people, but my mother's name would be on contracts, on partnership documents, on the foundation of something real and lasting. I'd finished what she started, corrected what they'd buried, proved what should have been obvious from the beginning. The ballroom erupted in final applause as Boone officially signed the partnership documents. Cameras flashed, journalists crowded forward. The moment was documented, witnessed, made permanent. I stood there feeling something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Complete.